Many aspects of social care have changed in the last year since Brexit, COVID-19, and the cost of living crisis. The care workforce landscape is one of the things that has seen the most change, and these changes will almost definitely be affecting your care organisation. To get a deeper understanding of how the social care workforce landscape has been affected, I spoke with Jon Bennett and Gemma Bullock from Retinue Solutions. Jon and Gemma collectively have 20 years plus experience in the workforce strategy space for the health and social care world, so have a deep understanding of this landscape. The organisation that they represent, Retinue, works to ensure that organisations with complex frontline workforces have technology and processes in place to ensure that they have the right people in the right places at the right time. I'm Simon Parker, and this is the Care Leaders Network podcast. How has the social care workforce landscape changed in the last 4 years, post-Brexit, COVID-19, and during the cost of living crisis? Now, this might feel like we're casting our mind back a little way here, but I think it's really important that we have this conversation. Why is it so important that we have a conversation about the impact of Brexit?
I'll take that one, Jon. So I think it's really important that we think about the impact of Brexit 4 years on, because it's a milestone, and because we are, 4 years on now, and it's actually much easier to look back in hindsight than it is at the time to probably digest what happened to the care sector during that time. So for me, it's really important now at this point in time that we look back. And also, I was talking to some care leaders at UK Care Week last week, and they were saying to me, actually, we've forgotten about that, because so many different things have happened since Brexit, that it can be really easy to forget actually what happened during Brexit, what the impact was. But for me, it really is that milestone and moment in time where things really started to change. And there's been lots of other things that have happened over the last 5 years. But Brexit was almost the start of what I would say was a domino impact that happened to the care sector over that time. We know that the impact of ending free movement across the EU had a huge impact on the care sector. There's some early estimates that I think Skills for Care have done. Some would say, and a kind of favourable estimate of the impact of leavers from the sector was around 350,000, which is still huge, but at its height and the worst case scenario, up to 1.1 million kind of leavers from the sector. And that's the impact up to kind of 2034. And when I heard that stat the other day, I just thought it's such an important conversation that we have and something we need to consider, because I'm sure we can't even really remember that happening because things have moved on so fast and so at such pace. But without considering that was the starting point of which everything else happened, it just seems like the right conversation to have, especially now that we're in 2024 and we are kind of a point on now.
Yeah, because it's not like Brexit's the only thing that's caused all sorts of problems from a recruitment perspective. Is it, as you said, that was almost like a tipping point of where things started to get particularly difficult, and then obviously there's been almost like a cascade of different things that have created an awful lot of pressure. So rewind to 2019. Contextualize what the landscape was from a workforce perspective. What was it all looking like back then, kind of prior to the Brexit situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think it was ever easy in the care sector to recruit top talent, but I think it was a lot easier compared to now. So there was a lot more available talent. We could obviously pull from a much bigger pool. We had EU resource as well as UK resource, so that made things a lot easier. And I think there was a different conversation. So definitely for us at Retinue, what we've found is that there was less of a conversation about your value proposition or putting out there what really made your organisation super attractive. There was less of a conversation around that, and more that you could put out a job and probably quite easily fill it. Now, that isn't the case now. It tends to be a much kind of larger conversation around your value proposition or that attraction to your organisation, your brand, what makes you different. And that wasn't the case, I don't think, back in 2019. Back then, there were a lot more workforce out there. There was less of a skills gap, so therefore it was kind of easier to attract that talent into your organisation and also retain them as well. So there wasn't such a cog and a constant churn of people working in and out of your organisation. There was less opportunity in other sectors, so there was a lot more opportunity to stay in the sector. But also, it was probably a little bit easier to work in the sector in 2019, which also kept people there. So from my perspective, that was kind of part of the landscape in 2019 at that time.
It's interesting what you said about the employer brand, the employer value proposition. I do think that care provider, I think all organisations have just had to take that far more seriously. You know, where there's more competition, people need to be able to really market themselves better than they might have had to do in the past, which I guess, ever the optimist, I'd say that that's a good thing, because people are kind of conducting themselves in a more of a sophisticated way. They're having to think, because you can't market something that isn't a fact, or at least you'd like to think that that wouldn't be the case. People are really thinking about employee well-being and financial well-being and onboarding processes and training and all of that type of stuff, so that you've got something really positive to market. Because if you just bog standard average, not doing anything particularly exceptional, why are people going to be excited to want to work with you anyway? So I'm ever the optimist. Obviously a hugely difficult set of circumstances, but hopefully that's given people a bit of a nudge in the right direction as well, to think about not just how they're recruiting, but then also how they're looking after their team and retaining that amazing talent as well. So how did Britain exiting the European Union change things within the care sector? What were the kind of the implications as such?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And the core factor here is we've lost a number of frontline workers. So people returned back to their other European locations on the back of Brexit because they could no longer work in the UK or in England, which means we're just short of frontline workers. And the stats show us that a lot of those people were working in what we call frontline jobs. And of course, many of those jobs were care jobs, whether that's in the social care sector or working in acute hospitals, for example. The stats actually tell us, and it's in a link to the stat that Gemma gave us earlier, but the facts are immediately we lost 350,000 EU workers. Many of them were in the front line and many of them worked in the care sector. As we sit here today, we know we're 170,000 workers short. And that's linked to losing that core population of workers that were working on the front line. So that's the immediate impact, is we don't have as many people available to us in frontline jobs. And frontline jobs means working in shops, working on building sites, working in cleaning jobs and facilities management, but also working in the care sector. So the care sector gets immediately hit. We also know, when we analyse today's workforce, back in 2019, about 9% of the workforce was non-EU. As we run the stats today, that's pushing it around the 15-16%. So again, just as a workforce mix, we have fewer workers available to us, and we're now working outside of the EU to bring workers in, looking at areas like Philippines, India, Africa. We do have folks from those locations now coming in and working in those roles. So it's changed the workforce population. Some of that, of course, is positive. Some of it is more challenging, where perhaps they don't quite understand the standards and the type of care that we give, and there's a bit more of a training need. But it is a bit more diverse. So, that's a positive. But let's come back again to, we just don't have as many frontline workers. That's linked to what you just said there, Simon, in that it has become more competitive. And I think when we've EU exit, pre-Brexit, we used to talk about the war for talent. That's been around from McKinsey since the early 2000s, late 90s. But I think when we used to picture the war for talent, we pictured professional white-collar workers, right? We can't find enough engineers, we can't find enough scientists, we can't find enough city workers, office workers. The war for talent is very much now about the frontline workforce as well, the care workers being part of that. So just in reducing the size of the talent pool, changing its mix, we immediately created a challenge for ourselves. That means, we have to work harder to get those folks into the sector, and absolutely, as somebody mentioned a second ago, retain them. Right? There's no point in putting a big shiny shop front window and saying, hey, come in, the water's warm, and then finding out it's actually freezing cold and nasty. We need to be realistic, create really positive working environments. You can't change what people have to do at the end of the day to deliver care. That's defined by the care that's required. But we can look at things like making it an engaging place to be, making sure people feel part of something, making sure people don't feel isolated. So it changed it by simply reducing the number of workers available to frontline jobs, including care, by the tune of about 350,000 pretty much immediately, which in any workforce landscape creates a big problem.
Big problem. It's interesting. You wouldn't link the numbers specifically together, but if you think so, 1.5 million people work in social care in the UK. So if we're talking 300-ish thousand, obviously we're not all the workforce specifically works within the care sector, but it's a big old chunk. That's like 20% of the workforce gone, disappeared in a very, very short period of time. And obviously that puts pressure on other sectors and other industries as well. But is it a surprise we're in a set of circumstances where we're probably not far off 200,000 people short in the workforce? It's really, really not. And I guess we're talking Brexit. There's been plenty of other things that have happened since 2020 as well. So what would you say the key other things that have happened since then that have really contributed to workforce challenges?
So it's what we call the perfect storm. So we had Brexit. Now, had we just had to deal with Brexit, I've just given you the numbers, I won't repeat them, that would have been bad enough. But that was very quickly followed by, we haven't said the word yet, have we? But COVID, which was highly impactful within its time, but has left us with what we call the echo effect, which is people were burnt out. So many people left the sector. The older workforce, so the sort of 55 plus that was working in there, have chosen to retire. It's less attractive because people saw what happens. It's, it was very much put in everyone's face. This is what a job looks like in care. It's hard, it's long hours, it's isolated. You're facing some pretty nasty stuff. So COVID in itself has created all kinds of challenges in the moment, but there's also now this very serious echo effect. We've got quiet quitting, which is where people are burnt out from COVID, not just in the care sector. This applies across the whole workforce, which is where people are just gradually doing less because they're just not up to it. So quiet quitting is a phenomenon. It's not people walking in and saying, I resign, I'm gone today. It's just doing a bit less, not putting as much effort in, dropping the hours a little bit, taking a bit longer to get to something next. You amplify that by hundreds of workers. Suddenly there's just less work getting done, whether that's care or cleaning, it's the same factor. So we've got Brexit, we've got COVID, we've got quiet quitting, and now we're entering this period again, which isn't being spoken about much at the moment, but you'll see the news is ramping up, that we're actually entering what is being defined as a pre-war era. It sounds absolutely terrifying, doesn't it? We haven't had a pre-war era for probably 100 years, but this is now being drummed into people's heads that, the war might be coming. It sounds absolutely dramatic, doesn't it? But check the news right here, right now. There's the top news articles today say, the UK is not ready for the imminent war. Now, whether you believe that's happening next week or in 3 years' time, the younger generation of today are gearing up for that thought. What does that mean for the workforce? It means they're thinking short term. They're thinking, I've got to get my fun in now. I remember what happened in COVID. I didn't go on holiday for 3 years. I don't want that again. Even if I don't get called to the front line, we might not be flying anywhere for 3 years because it's too dangerous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work gig jobs. I'm going to work short term. I'm going to think short term. I'm going to squeeze my fun in before someone takes it away from me again. And that again creates a very different dynamic in the workforce, including in care, which is people thinking short term, people not thinking career, they're thinking job, which is all of these things that leaders of these organisations need to keep factor in. Fewer workers, COVID, burnout, quiet quitting, and now a pre-war era younger workforce. It's a lot to think about. Gem, you probably had other things to add as we both dived in together.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I think to consider is we had the cost of living crisis as well. So again, that drove a lot of people to not work in the care sector anymore because they had to pay their mortgage. They had to deal with contending higher fuel prices, higher food prices. What did they do? They went to go and work in other sectors where the pay was sometimes more attractive because they had to, or they took on other jobs or side hustles in other sectors as well. So again, there was less focus sometimes predominantly on the day job because people thought, I need to earn more money. to feed my family, and therefore they went and did other things, went and looked at other sectors, hospitality, retail, all can offer same sort of working patterns that can be unsociable, but also sometimes better pay. So we lost more care workers to the cost of living crisis as well. So I think all of this is that perfect storm. I think there is some stats out there. 31% of care workers admitted, and that's a really key word, to wanting to leave the sector during COVID. If you think about that, that was just the people that admitted it. 31% is a third of the workforce. And you can kind of see where all of this together, all of that, plus a general election looming, where people think, oh, what's going to happen to the care sector now? What policies, procedures, legislation will come in? All of that together creates this period. And when I've talked to leaders about this, and certainly our clients, they say when you look back at all of that, they can see why they are in the position they are today and why it feels hard, because it has been hard. That's 5 years of one thing after the other that has happened, each time impacting the ability to recruit, but also retain top talent within the sector. So yeah, really is a perfect storm.
And one of the big parts of that perfect storm, and we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but I'm just going to underline this point because I've had quite a few conversations about this recently. Burnout, stress, anxiety. There was a conversation in the CLN community about this, not just about the frontline workers, but then also the back office teams as well. The amount of additional regulatory compliance type, basically administration type work that's required just to undertake the job is at a quantum significantly higher where it has been in the past, and that's on top of everything else. So you've got what is already a pretty intense job in lots of ways, compounded by all the stuff that's going on. You then go and throw into the fact that people are talking about the fact that this is could be a pre-war era, or at least it certainly feels like that. It doesn't matter whether the war's on the battlefield or whether it's a Cold War. You see that in the news every single day. You're going to be thinking to yourself, whoa, and people will behave differently as a result of it. Not to mention the fact that if you're tired and stressed and a bit anxious about the world, just throwing that in there for good measure, just to really kick people when they're down. There's a lot of reason why people are just under a lot of pressure at the moment, which makes life hard. It makes having a job hard. It makes paying your bills hard, particularly again with the cost of living crisis that's been that everyone's felt the pinch with. And it is, I think, the way that you described that is accurate. It is the perfect storm. Perfect in as much as the fact that it's a massive pain in the ass for everyone. So difficult to tackle. So obviously with what you do, these are conversations that you're having day in, day out. You're speaking to people about the what's going on in their world and the challenges that they're facing and all that type of stuff. And any good business should be focused on trying to build your proposition around how you can best serve people. What's that meant for Retinue? Like, how have you evolved as a business to help care organizations to navigate all of this crazy stuff that's been going on?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. And we are fortunate enough to work with some of the best care businesses in the UK, and we have had to adjust some of the solutions that we deliver. And let's briefly touch again on what it used to be like. It was almost a volume resourcing game. So there's all these folks out there that could work in the front line. How do we find the right ones to work in the care sector? How do we process them through a funnel? How do we make that efficient? And how do we make it as nice as possible for the customer and the worker, the candidate? That's completely changed. So we're back into this war for talent now. So we really have had to work with our clients to think about how do they win that war for talent and how do they get their unfair share? And, we have to say it out loud. If you're 170,000 workers short right here, right now, somebody has to lose and somebody has to win. That's just the facts. So it's our job to make sure our clients win that war for talent. First of all, let's start with that value proposition. It's exactly as you described earlier, Simon. Organizations probably didn't have to think about that too hard when there's a plethora of talent. Now it really is top of the list. What makes it great to work here? Why would somebody want to work here versus somewhere else? All of the things that other organizations in insurance, in financial services have had to think about for years, this is now top of the list. So we sit down with our customer, and often there's a million reasons, right? They've got the list of reasons, they just don't tell anybody about it when they're recruiting. So, we've got these benefits, we've got this culture, we give this back, we donate here, we're flexible, we are open to people that have to take certain time off to look after family, friends, pets, animals, all of the other good things. And when you say to them, and where do you tell people that? They say, oh, only after they start. So we've really started to move those benefits of working with these organisations right to the top, making sure it's a well-packaged value proposition to bring those folks in. But then we have to go beyond that. So we've done things like helping create travel into certain locations, so putting on minibuses. So if we are having to access workers from outside of the kind of core circle of influence, because that circle of influence has shrunk due to Brexit, due to all the things we've discussed, then we can bring people in. But of course, when we're looking at frontline workers, they often don't have the money within what they've been earning to suddenly start getting a bus twice as far, or a train 3 extra stops. They just don't have those funds within their income to make that change. So we do put on minibuses, we do put on coaches to bring people into the local vicinity. We've also had to make it easier. So again, when there's plenty of work around, it doesn't have to be quite as easy to access that work. And the way that we've made that easy is we've removed the friction from booking shifts. So most people these days are used to using technology to book everything else in their life. So how many people phone somebody to book a train or a cinema ticket or anything else in their life? But guess what? Lots of people still expected to phone somebody to book a shift. That's absolutely crazy in our opinion. So we now deploy technology that removes all of that friction, removes the need to speak to somebody, and it's all done self-serve through technology. Of course, the benefit with technology as well is it's a 24/7 access, and care is a 24/7 game. So somebody can come off a shift at 3 a.m. in the morning and book a load of shifts at 3:15 because they're not reliant on somebody being on the end of the phone between 9 and 5. So we've got the use of technology to make it more straightforward. We've also started to use technology to make people feel part of something. And again, this is really important in the care sector. Let's think of that poor worker who's perhaps doing home care. They might leave their flat or their house on their own. They go and see a number of people that they need to care for on their own, and then they return back to their house on their own. They don't have a collaborative experience that you might do if you're working in a care home or in a hospital. So we've put technology in place to help make them feel part of something, create a togetherness, reconnect them back to purpose through tech. That's just creating things like secure chat groups, news feeds that can be shared to celebrate success. Some of Gemma's clients put daily quizzes on our app, which ensures they've got a bit of fun. They can see their friends and their colleagues responding as well. Creates that spirit of I'm part of something. I'm not just an isolated carer trying to earn some money. I'm actually part of a movement. So we've had to work harder. We've had to think differently. We've got to win the war for talent, and you've got to find your unfair share. Otherwise, you might be one of the losers.
And being one of the losers, obviously, is can be terminal for businesses. At the end of the day, there are care organisations around the country at the moment that are buckling under the weight of the challenge for the war on talent. And I mean, I'm trying to think now. So before all of this, I would probably speak to somebody 2 or 3 times a year who would say something along the lines of, we actually can't serve the people coming in the door, the prospective customers. We can't serve the customers because we can't find the people. That's now a conversation that's, I'm just trying to think now, like if it's any less than once a month, I'd be stunned. So it's probably a 3 to 4 times increase on where it was previously. And yeah, anything that increases 3 or 4 times is going to be a pain in the bum. It's a really, really big number, and it just highlights the amount of pressure that people are under. One of the points that you highlighted earlier, which I think is really, really key around the messaging part of the platform, is making people feel part of something. It's very, very easy to feel lonely in a care role, particularly in home care. You kind of spelled it out with the journey. Depending on how many people you go and see, you could be out for and how long the shift pattern is and things. You could be out for a few hours. yes, you get the opportunity to go and see customers, and that will bring you a certain amount of joy and fulfillment and things like that. But they're not their team. They're not the people that are rooting for you. They're not the people that are kind of working um, uh, 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 with you collectively, and it's difficult to be able to create that connection. Particularly acute in home care, but it's true in care homes as well, partly because it's just busy as well.
Sure.
There's an awful lot of stuff that happens. So feeling part of something is a very innate human need. I can't remember, it's probably on Maslow's hierarchy somewhere, I can't think specifically, but that's a really, really key thing as well. So that's delivering on the employer value proposition of saying, come and join us. We're a special workforce and we root for each other and we're doing special, really important stuff. So yeah, I think that's a key point for me, just to underline that.
Yeah, and Simon, you mentioned there the fact that some of these businesses, just can't take on as many customers as they could because of the lack of workers. There's two really important points there. Number one, we do have to remember that many of the organisations in this sector, which is a really important sector for the service users, but they're also businesses. This isn't NHS. These are businesses owned by people that are trying to make a profit, right? And we need them to make a profit, otherwise they won't do it anymore, and then there'll be less care again. But we've never seen previously, sort of pre-2019, we didn't often hear that they couldn't grow their business because of the lack of talent. Now, we see that in other sectors, right? We've seen that in other sectors for years, across construction, across financial services. If we could just find some more experts, we could have a bigger business. Consultancy firms are trying to find more people for years. We've got technology clients who do boot camps because we just need more tech experts, and then we'll be able to grow our business again. But we haven't got enough at the moment. So you stick a load of people on a 10-week boot camp and you've got some more tech experts. That's where care is now. And it's not just that, there's not enough people around to give the care. For the first time ever, we're speaking to MDs, CEOs, owners who are saying, if I could just find some more workers, I could pick up more work and I could become more profitable and I could employ more people. But I can't find the workers. And that's the other challenge we've got, is the shortage is preventing the prosperity of these organisations, which at the end of the day are commercial organisations.
The other thing I would say is also that we know that demand in the sector is growing anyway because we have an ageing population. So all of this is happening at a time when the sector is only going to become more demanding in terms of the people we need to care for. So it's kind of like it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of scenario here, where we've also got a more demand than ever before, and it will keep growing. And we know it's going to keep growing over the next 20, 30 years. And if we can't keep people in the sector, then the challenge just becomes bigger. And we don't like to be negative here. We're also optimists and we know what to do to help. But it does add to that perfect storm as well, when you've got demand as high as it is. And like Jon said, people really need that talent so that they can service what they need to in their local populations.
Definitely. With one last point that I think is probably worth highlighting. We've got an election looming. We've got constant changes to legislation, etc. What's Retinue doing to help care organisations today to manage the uncertainty and to thrive coming out the other end?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is we've been around since 2011. Lots has happened since then. I think probably not so much has ever happened in such a compressed period as we've had since 2019, 2020. But we have always been around for our customers. We've navigated them through all of these changes successfully. Okay, but it's been lumpy and bumpy because no one could predict what we've been through specifically over the last 4 to 5 years. But we always find a way to see them through it, whether that's COVID, whether it's Brexit, whether it's more legislative things like IR35 changes or minimum national wage or minimum living wage. We are always there for our customers to make sure they've got a partner to navigate that through. So I think our clients go into any uncertainty a bit more confident with Retinue by their side. And why is that? Look, I think the key thing that many organisations now know is resourcing, recruitment, whatever you want to call it. It's an expert game, right? It's not something to be done in the margins. It's not something to ask HR to do to the side of their desk. You need experts to deliver a strategic, sustainable resourcing strategy, whether that's looking to make your permanent hiring, managing your flexible workforce, even statement of work now is in the mix. You can't treat that as something that is going to be done on the edges if we have time. And when we work with our customers, they know they've got the deep expertise of Retinue sat alongside them. We've got experts in recruitment, we've got experts in attraction, we've got experts in engagement, we have experts in technology, we have experts in legals. To have all of these deep experts, which we can call upon at any given time for our customers, whether it's for 5 minutes or for 5 weeks, it's impossible to have that in-house unless you've got a huge organisation where you can afford to have sort of deep experts in this stuff, which I don't know of any that sit in-house, certainly in the care sector. Then they know they've got that expertise ready and waiting alongside them. And what comes alongside that is agility. Like we couldn't do what we do if we weren't agile. So we don't sit there and say, yeah, that's a bit worrying, we'll come back to you in 6 months. Right, we're ready to go. We're ready to rock at any given time. This is all we have to worry about. Right, we don't have to run the care home. We don't have to deliver the care. We just have to deliver very rock solid resourcing strategies and day-to-day operational services. So we can be agile. So if something comes at us that we're not expecting, we've had a bit of that over the last few years. I'm sure there's more to come. Then our clients know that we won't sit there and ponder. We will react. We will move quickly. We've got the resources. We've got access to extra resources ourselves in the form of our associate pools. So they know that they're not going to be left hanging for a period of time where, the care standards might go backwards or quality of service might go backwards. We absolutely can't have that. And then I think also we bring to the table that expert comms and engagement expertise. So communicating and engaging through these changes, couldn't be more important. We've got to make sure that people know if something's coming, it's coming. When something hits, that we can get out to the workforce. There's no point in sitting there saying, right, we've got a plan. How on earth are we going to tell these frontline workers that are out there doing their jobs day to day? They're not sat around a table or sat in an office. We need to be able to communicate and engage with them. And that's where somebody like, Gemma really brings the skills to the table. On top of that, expert resourcing skills that we have within the organisation, on top of being agile, we can also make sure the communications are absolutely on point. Frontline workers, care workers are typically quite hard to communicate with. They're out there, they're busy, they're offline, they're in locations where there's no data connections, all of those things. We have to be ready for that. So I think it comes down to those three things: absolute expertise, complete agility, and making sure we're ready to communicate and engage when times of change hit. Gem, I don't know whether you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think that, again, it goes back to some of the conversations we've already had around COVID and now pre-war times. And actually, as Jon said, we have the experts and we're already talking and thinking about this. So we're not sat here going, war might strike one day. We're already building for that. We already know how we will respond to that. And we've got the platform in place to do that. And I think from a comms and engagement point of view, you can never underestimate how scared a care worker may be or how fearful they may be. And I think we really saw that during COVID at that time that it struck. They were on the front line. They were with the COVID patients. They didn't have the right PPE and things were really, really fearful. And their basic needs, if we go back to leadership school and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, their needs were shook. Their core needs for health and safety were shook. And at that time, the places that really retained their people were the people that communicated and engaged effectively and understood that challenge. And I think something we really coach and teach here at Retinue is that piece around how can you show empathy, how can you be a great leader, and how can you engage in those moments where it's most needed. And that will happen again. And I think having the tool already in place and then having the expert that you can call to say, I'm really stuck with this. Today, I know that morale in my care home or out with my frontline team is really low. What do I do about it? Having somebody to call and even talk that through and to help you with that strategy is really, really important. And that's what we kind of pride ourselves on. And that's what we do with our leaders is we really support them. Not for the clout or to be shown or for them to even know that we're there, but it's so that they feel that they've done the right thing for their frontline workers during that time. And the other thing I'd say is that we really care here. We're all from a health and care background. It's the industry that we love. We want to see it thrive and survive. So we're really passionate about getting this right. And that's why we go out there and make sure that we have our fingers to the pulse and can support our people.
My summary on that really is the fact that the game has changed. It has got more competitive, whether it's the stuff that you're doing in house or whether it's the partners that you're working with. Ultimately, you need to be operating at a higher, more competitive level, because ultimately you're not going to win the game. And if winning the game means delivering great care, the difference between delivering great care and having a sustainable business, or delivering not so great care and potentially not having a sustainable business, it's super important to get that right. So I feel like we've had a really, really good broad conversation, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Gemma, Jon, a pleasure to see you both, and hopefully we'll get to have another conversation soon.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Cheers, folks.